Okay, hi everyone. About 80% of you are friends I already know, and the other 20% I'll get to know by the end of the weekend, so we're all friends. And I just want to let you know, don't panic guys, but Dennis Jennings told me that we've just spotted about 12 FBI agents in the woods there, okay, telescopic rifles, but don't panic. They always do that whenever I have seminars. Relax. Is he joking? No, we're joking. I just want to see if you guys are awake. You had your coffee. Okay. Oh, listen. This is, Vern has these. What are they anyway? Yeah, they're $10, but what are they? They don't have anything on the back. They're magnets, really? Oh, they're magnets. How about that? Okay. Let's see if I got metal on me. No. So if you guys really believe after what I show you today that this is what it is, then get them from Vern. They're great. And death to taxes. I've only got about 90 minutes to talk today, which I normally try to talk about an 8-hour seminar, trying to squeeze it in and give you the basics of what I teach. There's a couple of problems today about giving you everything. I can't do it because of time, and I can't do it because I don't have overheads, because we're outdoors and we don't have overhead projectors. There's a lot of legal information that I normally talk about, and I'm not going to be able to do that today because I don't want to write legal information on the board because you'll be falling asleep and I'll be getting a cramp. So we're going to stick to the basics. But what I want to do in these 90 minutes is I want you to get a feel for who I am, and I want you to know who I am because I think one of the greatest strengths I've been able to provide in what I teach is not the information itself. I think the information is, once you understand it, is self-explanatory. Yes, it'll blow your minds for some of you who've never heard this before, and for you who already know it, you'll just reconfirm it. But I think one of the greatest strengths I've got is that I'm able to connect with people for some reason. I just seem to be able to bring it down to a level where it's just people talking to people, and we're not trying to talk above anybody's heads, and we're trying to show you that the reality is that the educational system is actually done us a disservice on purpose to try and provide a form of education that doesn't allow you as an individual to understand some really, really simple concepts. It's actually been intentionally removed from our educational system because 100 years ago in our schools, in high school and in some cases in elementary school, we used to be able to, we actually learned Latin, we learned philosophy, we learned many languages, arts, we learned many subjects that are completely removed from our system today for one very, very important reason, and that was to keep the people ignorant. One thing I really like about having Larry Sontag speak before me, we've done this a couple of times, is that his information leads just perfectly into what I teach, because he gives you a good grounding on the idea of corporate entities, legal fictions, a good understanding of something that most people have no idea about, and assumptions especially. And then when I come on, I don't necessarily have to go into that background because I have to spend usually 2 hours explaining legal concepts that most of us have no clue about. And then you start seeing it everywhere. You know, it's like buying you buy your red Ferrari, because I know we can all afford it, and we buy a red Ferrari, then they're everywhere, but nobody had one before. But it's the same thing. You start noticing it all over the place when you didn't notice before. So my little slogan here, we're going to take that off. And I'm going to use this flip chart here to write whatever I think is necessary, but I'm going to keep it to a minimum. What I want to do for the first hour is I want to go over some of the basic information about our Canadian income tax system. And I want to make sure that everybody in this room understands it. But before we start, I have one or two questions I want to clarify. Who in this room has heard me speak before? We're about 50%, 60%. Okay. Who in this room gets my weekly newsletter? Same group. Okay, that's good. You guys are on the ball. For those who haven't heard me, I'll try to condense it, but yet keep it as easy to understand as possible. I'm just going to grab my notes here. And for the second part, probably the last half hour, I'm going to do what I have seemed to get into a habit of doing in my newsletters and in my seminars lately, is I'm going to give you the latest inside scoop on the world of the I don't know if you want to call it the Illuminati, the Committee of 300, or whatever you want to. There's lots of books on there on these kinds of they. You know, they They? Larry was saying, who are they? Well, I'll give you what they are up to these days as of 48 hours ago. I have, for some reason, what's been happening since I've been teaching this information for about a little over a year now. I started in June last year, publicly speaking. So it's August now, so 14 months. It seems that there's been certain people that have wanted to come to me and give me information. They volunteered to do this. I didn't ask them to come to me, and I didn't ask for what they're giving me. But there seems to be some kind of a weird serendipity in the universe that says, okay, Alex is the one that we're going to get all this information to so he can pass it out to the people. And I've got people in the top levels of government, in the top levels of banking, in the top levels of national security that are contacts now that come to me, excuse me, with a heat here, that come to me with information that is proving to be portentous, I guess, of the future of what's coming down the pike. And I seem to be like the lightning rod for all this information. I tend to have to go back east every month right now, specifically Montreal. I seem to be going there about a week every month, and it's not to do seminars, it's actually to do research and to meet with contacts there that are in Ottawa, in Montreal, as well as in the United States. And because I've made the effort to go out there with no expectation of compensation, I just go there, my own time, my own money to go there and find out what's going on. They have, I guess I've earned their respect because I'm serious about what I do. And I seem to have, for some reason, 48 hours ago, or 36 hours ago, I guess, I seem to have accidentally stumbled on what's really happening right now. And I got a call at 5 o'clock in the morning, the morning that I left here, which was yesterday morning. And the call, it was just the first thing that the person said at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm half asleep. Hello, congratulations, you just solved the problem. You just figured out what's going on. And it's like 5:10 or something. Okay, so I can't tell the public yet what's going on, but you guys are in. I'm going to tell you afterwards what's happening, okay, after I give you the basics. You guys are going to have to stay in there. You can't leave. Okay. All right, let's get to some basics, okay? And for those who've been here before, or I should say who've seen me before, it's a good refresher. For those who haven't, you're going to get an interesting education here. Everybody in this room has heard the phrase that income tax is voluntary in Canada. That is a fact. Income tax in Canada is voluntary. The only problem is that everybody out there who's been fighting income tax for all these years has always been, as far as I'm concerned, doing it the wrong way. There has been as many ways to prove that income tax is illegal or invalid as there are people out there doing it. And the most common way that people have been fighting income tax is that they've been saying it's unconstitutional. The government never had a right to collect income tax because of all these rules that came, or these, I should say, the Constitution, the BNA Act, court cases, and so on and so forth. So they've always said, yeah, we should not pay income tax because it's illegal. The government has no right to collect it. And since when does the government ever follow the laws? And you guys understand that after listening to Larry. The government does not follow. Bruce is laughing out there. Yeah. So if you're trying to force the government to follow regulations that prevent it from collecting a tax, you're fighting a losing battle. And I'll tell you right now, I'll probably will get a chance to explain to you why the government has been able to ignore the BNA Act and all the court rulings about income tax. And for those who don't know, let me go back and give you a quick Cold Notes version of exactly how income taxes came into being. You guys know the history of income tax in Canada? Most of us know about it in the United States. But a lot of people here who have already listened to my seminars know about it, who've done their research. Let's give you a quick 5-minute explanation. 1913, the Bank Act of Canada came in and allowed the banks of Canada, which was like at that time the Bank of Montreal, Royal Bank, Toronto Dominion, etc., the basic big banks, the same ones we have today, it allowed the banks to actually take control over Canada's currency and coinage. And it took it over from the government in 1913. It's in the Banking Act today, actually. It also took one more thing that we weren't aware of, and this was all done through backroom dealing, so we don't know the full details, and we don't pay attention to things like the Bank Act of Canada, because I'm sure we don't have it sitting on, I don't even see it on Wes's table. My gosh, that's amazing. And he's got everything else. So it's not exactly something that you would call nighttime reading. But what it also did is the Bank Act of Canada actually took away the right of the government to control the gold of Canada. It actually gave custody and management of the central gold reserves to the Canadian Banking Association. Now that gold that they took control of was actually our gold. And this happened in 1913. As soon as the banks took over the currency and coinage, as well as the control of our gold, the deed was done. After that, it was only a matter of using political manipulation to be able to put us under their thumb. Once you have control of the currency, once you have control of the money system and the money supply, and the government of Canada doesn't print it anymore, it's game over. Well, I scoured some old, I guess, coin and jewelry places that had old Canadian notes. Really hard to find this because the guy told me that the one I was looking for, he had one left and he'd been trying to sell it. It was $225, but it was an old Bank of Montreal note from I think it was January 12th, 1912, and it actually said on top of it, Bank of Montreal, fully capitalized $16 million. It says it right on the very top. Fully capitalized means in 1912, before the Bank Act was passed, that the Bank of Montreal could print its own notes as long as it backed it up with Dominion notes, which is Canadian government money, or gold. And that was 1 year before the Bank Act of Canada passed. And on the bottom, it was actually signed by the treasurer and the president of the Bank of Montreal. And it actually, I don't have the bill with me today. I think I've lost it or somebody stole it from one of my seminars. I don't know. I've got to keep looking for it. But it actually has their signatures in real pen. It's actually fading. They had to sign each one. And that was a $20 bill. So that's what they had to do before 1913. And I actually have another one also. I have another note, which is a Dominion of Canada bill. So I actually had a $20 bill from the Dominion of Canada, which was a government note or government $20 bill. And that was actually printed by the government of Canada at the same time. That was the one that was actually considered valid money until 1913. So what happens in 1913? The banks take over our money. 1914, anybody knows what happens? World War I. Okay. World War I comes along. What happens? The government, oh, well, we need some money. What are we going to do now? Well, we don't have control of our own money. We can't print it anymore. What do we have to do? Well, the banks have a solution. Why don't you borrow? And that was the end, beginning of the end for us. It happened the same way in the United States, same time. It's not a coincidence, by the way. The number 13 is very important to these people because that's why they chose the year 1913 to do this in the United States and Canada, 13 and 31. As soon as World War I happened, boom, it was over. So World War I, all of a sudden, we go into the big D. And that's the end of Canada as a sovereign nation. A lot of people have heard the fact that in 1931, Canada was sold to the international bankers, and it went into bankruptcy. I believe right now I'm in negotiations to get myself a copy of the actual deed. Nobody's ever seen this before, and I'm hoping to get it, of the actual deed that shows Canada being sold off, an agreement to the international banking cartel. I'm hoping to get it.
That's the year of the Statute of Westminster also.
Yes, it is.
Did it have anything to do with it?
No, it didn't at that particular time. Actually, you know what? The question is, did it have anything to do with the Statute of Westminster? I shouldn't say no offhand because, you know, stranger things have happened. There's a very strong possibility, now that I think about it, it happened in the same year.
Yeah.
Very possible they have ties to each other. So let's not go, well, although I don't want to go down that path right now, so let's keep it tight today. As soon as you have debt, somebody has to pay that. Did you know that we didn't have an income tax before 1913? We didn't need one. But as soon as we have a debt that's printed, that's because of the bankers giving us all the money that we want, and you know where they printed it? They printed it off their printing presses as if you had a photocopier, nothing to back it up. At least that's what they said they don't need. They actually said that the Banking Act actually says that you require the money to be backed up by gold. Except that it didn't last very long because as soon as World War I came in, they said, you guys need the money. You're in this war. I guess we better just forget all those rules and get the money printed out so we have money in circulation, so you can buy weapons, you can pay for the army, you can buy the ships, you can buy the armaments, you name it. And because of that excuse, it's never changed, and the debt has gotten worse and worse and worse. And ever since then, we've never actually had to have money backed up by anything. Now, remember something here. In 1913, also the banks took over Canada's gold. Has anybody ever asked today where our gold is? Do you know how many tons we had? There was over 6,000 tons of gold, I believe, in the Central Gold Reserves in 1913. We have no idea how much are in there today. Nobody's ever audited it because most of our gold is gone. Probably Switzerland, probably England is my guess. It's the same thing with Fort Knox today. It's 1956, I believe it was, or 57. It was the last time an audit was done in Fort Knox. Harry Truman tried to do an audit at that time. He was not allowed to. They told him it was national security. You couldn't go into Fort Knox. And ever since the late 50s, there's never been an audit in Fort Knox to count how much gold is in Fort Knox. But you know, the American people were told that they have to turn in their gold in 1930 because it was illegal to own gold and the American government needed it. So they all melted it down. You had to melt your jewelry. And this is part of history of North America and how many kids in school are taught this. You had to bring in all your gold, your coins, anything you had that was gold. And it was melted down and turned into gold bars and put into Fort Knox. And that was where it was going to stay as a security. But the reason that they melted all the gold is because the United States also declared bankruptcy at the same time. And this was collateral. Today, all that gold, there is no gold in Fort Knox except for a nominal amount. You cannot go into Fort Knox. No president has the right to go into Fort Knox. Nobody has the right to go into Fort Knox in the United States. The same thing up here, except up here, nobody even has a clue to even think about asking. And all the gold, as far as we know right now from those areas, there's some real mystery behind it. Part of it's in England, part of it is not under the control of those people anymore. There's another story. Maybe we'll talk about that afterwards. So this is where the income tax came in. So what happens? The government of Canada is told that you have to find a way to pay off this debt because you're now stuck. You have a debt of, I don't know, it was 20 million or 30 million back then in those dollars, which is a lot today. And you had to find a way to pay it back. Well, the government had no way of paying it back. They're not in charge of the money anymore. They don't print their own money. I told you they're out there. You hear that? You know what? Actually, they shot the wrong group. They're all dead. Okay. You got to have a sense of humor about this. As soon as the government would realize that there was no way for them to pay this back, the bankers we have a solution for you. Why don't you just come up with an income tax? But the government says, we have no right to collect an income tax from people. It's against the law. We don't have any authority to do that. Don't worry about it. We've got a solution for you. What was the solution? Well, they called it a temporary tax, but I'm going to write a word on here. It's called corporate. See, the government does not have the right to collect an income tax. It still doesn't today. But it doesn't have the right to collect it from what is known as natural persons. And there's a story behind this one that's going on right now today as well. Natural persons are defined actually in legal dictionaries as somebody who is a person who is under God and has full sovereignty. Basically my version of the definition. But natural person is not a corporate person. It is who you are born under God. A corporate is the same thing as a business. And my friend Dave Lindsay, and Vern can clarify if I'm a little bit off on this one, but Dave Lindsay, who's a really good friend of mine, Vern works with him. He's here with some of Dave's books as well. Dave Lindsay's been fighting a court case in Ottawa. Just about 2 weeks ago, he was in court on the definition of the word natural person. You want to know how corrupt our courts are? We have been trying to prove that something as obvious as a natural person, which is in legal dictionaries, has been around for a long time, actually exists. Our courts say there's no such thing. What they're actually telling you is that nobody in Canada is actually sovereign, and nobody was born under God. That's what our courts are telling you. Our courts that always say, you swear upon the Bible, but you can't be under God. Okay? Dave Lindsay, for the first time we know of in Canadian judicial history, actually spoke for 3 hours, quite eloquently, I believe. I'm waiting for the transcripts to come in to see what he said, because it's a lot he talked about. But he actually talked to the judge for 3 hours in Ottawa, Hamilton. Is it Ottawa, Hamilton? Ottawa, Carleton? Ottawa, Carleton, for the Ottawa, Carleton School Board, for somebody who actually worked for the Ottawa, Carleton School Board, that this gentleman, Tom Kennedy, was a natural person. And the judge actually, for the first time, let this man speak, let Dave Lindsay speak, and he let him speak for 3 hours. And he went into all the definitions, and he explained everything really, really well. But for the first time in history, we actually have it in court records explaining that a natural person is under God and actually is sovereign in Canada. That's how difficult it is in Canada to actually say that you're a natural person. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because natural persons, as I put that little sign there, natural persons don't have to do this. That's why it's so difficult to prove you're a natural person in Canada. Because natural persons don't pay income taxes. Did you know something? Natural persons don't pay income taxes in the United States either. So we have two countries that actually brought in taxes illegally, and they could do it illegally because they made them corporate taxes. And actually Dave Lindsay came up with an argument that was absolutely brilliant because he found an act. It was 1914, and it was, no, 1916, wasn't it, Vernon? The business, what was it called again? Do you remember? The Business Act? I think it was the Business Tax Act or Business Income Tax Act. Something of that nature. 1916. 1 year before income tax passed in Canada. And this actual act says that all corporations are required to pay income taxes, and the definition of a corporation in this Business Income Tax Act, which I hadn't even heard of, it was so archaic, it was exactly the same definition as is the Income Tax Act of today. Same definition says that all corporations, all entities, blah, 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 are subject to income tax. Then in 1917, the year after, the Income Tax Act, which the government is saying applies to all people, including natural persons, which it doesn't, has exactly the same definition. Now, you know something? If it's a business act, if it's for business income tax, you can't apply to natural persons because it's a business. It's a corporation. It must apply to a corporate body, which is basically a legal fiction. It cannot apply to natural persons. So when they define it in the Income Tax Act, Dave Lindsay made the most brilliant argument because it proves, it's very simple, that's axiomatic, it cannot apply to natural persons. So there's where we have to go in order to find out why we are paying income tax today if we are not subject to it. If all natural persons in Canada are not subject to income tax, why are we all paying income tax today? You'd wonder. Well, there's fear. But in terms of the legal reasons, why are you paying income tax today? Because you know something, Revenue Canada, CCR, whatever you want to call them, has the authority to go after you, don't they? Sure they do. Well, there must be a reason why they have the authority to go after you. It's because exactly what Larry Sontag said. Let me put this down. ALEX. Now, I'm going to finish. I probably won't fit here, so that's okay. Just pretend my name's, whatever. Well, yeah, doesn't matter. It's the letters themselves. What's the difference between that one and the way this one is spelled? It's your presumption that it's the same name. Well, it isn't the same name because I'm missing letters, but let's pretend it's the same name. It's your presumption that it's the same name. But you know what? The government knows better. One of the reasons that they have the educational system set up the way it is because they don't want you to know these things. They also don't want lawyers to know these things, believe it or not. Lawyers have no clue about law. You think they know law? No, they don't. Most of them know reasonable procedure, but they don't know law. In fact, I would say right now I know more about law than a lawyer does. Lawyers are not taught to think. Lawyers are robots. The reason we resent them is because we know that they don't work for us, they work for the Crown. Lawyers actually take an oath to work for the Bar Society. The Bar Society works for the government. The government does not work in our best interest. All lawyers, when you pay them, you are basically being a sucker. You're paying somebody to help you lose. Okay? Because what you're doing is you're paying them to walk into their system, into their little foreign jurisdiction, and you're allowing them to play their game with your money and your life. And they don't work for you. Because all lawyers are under a fiction. You, as a natural person, are under a whole different name there. If you don't understand the difference between this and this, you will continue to be hoodwinked for the rest of your life. Now, you got to understand, this is a really tough crowd, okay? You guys are just... It's much easier with my slides. All right. Let's see where... I want to make sure there's, like I said, there are only a couple of problems we're having today, so that I wish I could have my slides because it's all nicely done and I had more time. So I'm trying to go through this quickly, but making sure I don't miss anything. The reason that your name is spelt in capital letters is because it's the way I've heard it said. Actually, it's kind of interesting. It's like an acronym. If it's in capital letters, the reason that makes a difference is because it's like RCMP or CCRA, for example. They're always capitalized because they become corporate entities or acronyms. They're not real. They're not natural persons. You don't spell RCMP like this. See, all of a sudden that's a rump or recump or whatever. See, you know that. So what they're actually doing when they spell it in capital letters is they're showing that it's an entity. Yes, I know they're initials, but it's still done in capital letters. It's, in fact, this way you could actually do that, and it becomes the same thing. It's just initials. And your presumption is that's a full name, and it's not. So the trick is that you've got to learn how to turn yourself back into a natural person. And actually, my friend Bruce Stellier, who's going to be speaking, when he's speaking? Sunday, Bruce? Yeah. Sunday. He's going to be going into a lot about the procedures of language and actually how to write your name and understanding how what the difference is between this one and this one. So I won't be spending too much time today because that's one of the areas you will. That's the wonderful thing about this whole weekend is the number of speakers and the kind of information you're getting are all going to be tied in together. You can actually get 10 times more knowledge because you have different speakers on different subjects, but all the information ties in very nicely. But Bruce is going to explain to you what the difference is between a fact and a fiction. Because that's what that is. It's a fiction. It's made up. It's made up to represent something. And this is a fact. This is who you are as a natural person. So what does Revenue Canada have the authority over? They have the authority over a corporate fiction. There's many names for it. There's corporate fiction, there's corporate body, there's legal fiction, legal entity, corporate entity. They're all interchangeable, but they all tell you that it is anything but who you are. What you are actually, in legal terms, is a trustee of a legal entity. You, the natural person, are a trustee. A trustee has to be responsible for an entity. And this trustee, being you, is not subject to the actual income tax. You are, as the trustee, as the natural person, are not subject to income tax. You never were. But you are the trustee of the fiction that is subject to the income tax. Now this fiction here pays income tax. We'll get into how you became this fiction in a couple of minutes. This fiction, however, has a real problem. See, this fiction is just made up. It's made up out of thin air. In fact, in this room right now, if there was, let's say there's pretty close to 85 to 100 people in, let's say 100 people. Did you know that in this room, in this group right now, there is not 100 people according to the government. There is actually 2,000 people according to the government right now. There's 2,000 people here. 100 of you are natural persons and 1,900 of you are fictions. Because each one of you is the trustee of an average of 20 legal fictions. That's 20 of them in each one of you. What's a legal fiction in your life right now? Your checking account, your credit cards, your driver's license, your income tax, and you can go on and on. Every single credit card. Some of you have 20 credit cards, so you're probably worth about 50 legal entities. Legal entities, by the way, in and of themselves are not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to put labels on things because everything works with entities these days. You have to understand if it's in your best interest or not, and you have to understand why Larry talks about your privacy being so important, because everything you do is based on legal entities. And therefore, who creates the legal entity? Did you create it or did the government create it? Yeah. Okay, if the government created it, who owns it? Yeah. The government. But if you're the trustee and the government owns it, the trustee is expected to take care of it. is expected to do what the owner expects it to do. So now you being the trustee, but you didn't create this, now you have to manage it. And if you don't manage it the way the government expects you to manage it, that's deep caca for you. They have full control over you because you're the trustee. So your job is to remove yourself as the trustee of the income tax fiction. Because if you don't, the income tax fiction that they created for you, which is known as a taxpayer. In fact, if you look in the Income Tax Act, all the definitions apply to the word taxpayer.